This is Ozzy Skateboard, and you're listening to UCY.TV.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
I think a new world order is emerging.
An inside job? How dare you? How dare you?
To create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of a scientific caste system.
We shall go on to the end. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall never surrender.
Good day, everybody. It's the 14th of May 2016, 4 p.m. in the Netherlands, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is UCY.TV with the Solvinur Event. I'm your host, Walter. Welcome, everybody. In the chat room at UCY are at the moment Captain Gringo, Cracker, Grump, Hopper, Joe, Possible Suspect, Surely You Jest, and Vince, and one and on. Welcome, everybody. How is life over in the United States? We've had a couple of good days with the weather. It's like summer, especially where I live, in the garden on the south side. Did you guys hear Sundays, I don't know exactly what time, but I think 10 a.m. With a guest, I think Patrick was his name. Please correct me if anybody in the chat also heard and knows better. Where he was talking about all these misconceptions in the quote-unquote truth movement. I found out things about the Fed. People tell you that, oh, the Fed is privately owned, right? That's what you hear, isn't it? Well, guess what? It's I had this discussion also like years ago with somebody when I was still, very unaware of the Fed. And he also told me that, it's privately owned. And I said, well, are you sure about that? I mean, when I go Google and I type in Federal Reserve, it actually goes to a .gov site, right? It's a part of government. It's not privately owned. And if you go to the frequently asked questions, you can actually see it there. Well, that's a lie, right? Okay, now we've gone, into the deep end, and it's leading you to endless rabbit holes. It's a .gov site. That should be the end of the discussion. So yeah, Patrick Jordan and Clint Richardson were on with Scholly last week. Check them out if you missed them. I thought it was very good. Yeah. So. I do P. I don't understand that one. Yeah, sorry about that. Anyway, we should be continuing with Tragedy and Hope 101. Where we are at tag number 12, which is coming up. I think this is chapter 3 or 4, I don't remember exactly. 5, we were at 5. If you have questions, please put them in capital letters, they will more easily jump out at me. I'll see what I can do with it. Our best move, it continues, against the network's control of our money supply is to begin developing and using competing currencies. Money that literally competes with the network's fraudulent debt money that circulates in the economy. This move accomplishes two important functions. One, it cuts the network out of the equation when we buy and sell from one another. And two, it protects us in the event of a network-initiated run on the dollar. And I remember this guy, he was strolling the streets in the industrial sector, and I was there too. And I asked him, what's he doing? And he said, I'm selling coins, silver coins. I said, oh, that's nice. Yeah, it's for businesses, so that they can trade amongst each other with these coins instead of euros. And he had sold some of those. But he also mentioned that they tend to keep them for themselves instead of using them as a currency. So. So those things are not illegal here. You can do that. There's lots of those kinds of currencies around. In Amsterdam they have the lets, and that's been going on for like 30, 40 plus years or something. It's a kind of system where you can earn, so to say, time, right? It's a time-changing system. You can earn these points. And then you can get a gardener to work, or somebody to cut your hair, or whatever, you know. And lots and lots of people were using these currencies. And that is a nice way to avoid all of the taxes. And it's not illegal. You're allowed to do that. Okay, let's see, where were we? 12, what does it say at 12? 12. The network wants to eventually replace the dollar with a one-world currency. To force the United States and other nations who depend on the dollar into the new currency, it will likely cause a dollar panic and then put the new currency forward as a temporary emergency solution to get trade moving again. The greater the financial and social chaos, the less likely any nation will have the power to resist. However, if there are already other viable currencies in place that can facilitate trade without major disruptions to the economy, there will be no need for the citizens of the world to accept an expanded debt-dominated slave money system. Alright, so another thing I should probably mention, the next 13 is on Dogecoin, for instance. The Dutch National Bank, I suppose they used to mint the money for the Netherlands. Now they have to get permission from the European Bank, as far as I know. So they were like the Dutch central bank, so to speak. They've apparently come up with the idea of creating their own Bitcoin, so to speak. It's the DNB coin. So it looks like the banks are, in on this also. They want a part of it, right? Continuing, gold and silver are the two most obvious forms of money that we could begin using. And some states, aware of the dangers of the current monetary system, have begun pushing legislation that will make gold and silver legal tender again. But gold and silver aren't the only options. Digital currencies like Bitcoin, Litecoin, and even Dogecoin are gaining traction amongst millions of citizens around the world. Right, so 13, Dogecoin. Dogecoin, though it actually began as a joke, established a strong community of users by March 2014. And began as a joke? That's why the strange name or something? Strange. I don't know. I don't know anything about these coins. Dogecoin are gaining traction among millions of citizens around the world without any sanction from government whatsoever. Right? 14. For a short article and video on Bitcoin, go to joeplumber.com and then / too long to read. You'll just, I hope there's a search box in there and just type Bitcoin. joeplumber.com, that's where we get this info from, guys. In addition to these digital currencies, there is also the option of competing private currencies, community currencies, time-based currencies, and so on. The key point is to remember why the network created central banks in the first place. To control the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. 15 says Tragedy and Hope, page 324. The sooner we develop effective ways to trade outside of their system, the sooner their system will become irrelevant and we can ignore it into oblivion. In chapter 4, And we are now at heading 3, attack the income tax. In chapter 4, we went over how the network, approximately 100 years ago, began stealing massive amounts of money for its global domination project. It called the theft income tax and has glorified the annual expropriation as a citizen's moral duty ever since. It's beyond the scope of this text to delve into how the network, acting through its tax-exempt foundations, has used education to build public support for this previously illegal confiscation of wages. 16 says, the topic of how the network has used education to pull the strings of the public mind is enormous and well worth looking into. If you want a short introduction, he recommends at Griffin and Norman Dodd. I recommend personally myself John Taylor Gatto. Check it out at tragedyandhope.com. Suffice to say, using government as its instrument, the network can now funnel trillions of dollars each year into furthering its own interests. From multi-trillion-dollar banker bailouts to the approximately $100 million per hour gushing into the military-industrial complex. Yeah. What's the worst spending that the government does, is my question. Where does most of the money go? And it's like, well, you can say like, well, there's a lot of money going into the military-industrial complex, right? And I'm sure that's the case, and of course that's all wrong, but you need to see it in perspective. Also, as in, what percentage of the expenditures, of the total expenditures, goes to this military-industrial complex? Blah, blah. And then you should also be able to compare that with other nations. Like, maybe you should like put the EU, all of them countries together. Russia, how much do they spend, right? I don't know, possible. Is that true? Do you have like a .gov website where I can actually see that? Right? Possible? Can you do that for me? It shouldn't be too hard to find, right? I could do it on air, you know, I do it on air also. It doesn't fracking matter to me. But, sure. You got a website there, P? That says that most of the money, where does most of the money go to? Let's see, where were we? 17, right? The network can legally accomplish things with government taxation and government policy that it could never accomplish privately. Of course, private power disguised as government power is hardly a new phenomenon, and those who founded the United States federal government did everything they could to protect us from this problem. Yeah. How did they do that, right? That's also a question that I have. It says here, And those who founded the United States federal government, did they just like pull that out of a wizard's hat or what? Did they put some chemicals together and poof, there's government? What's going on here, right? Then with a little grammar that I have on this subject, you hear the story about this woman that is supposed to have asked what came out or something, right? And then the answer was given, or the question was something like, "What did you give us?" Right? So, and that is also the wrong attitude, right? And the answer was a republic if you can keep it, right? So, but who decided that it was going to be a republic? That it was going to be this form of government? Who decided that? That there was going to be any government in the first place? I'm not sure if that quote is correct, right? About this woman who came up and said, "What did you give us?" Well, that's the wrong attitude. That's the attitude of a serf. Right? You shouldn't be having that attitude. You should not only be outraged about the these, again, this is strange talking. This is. You can get enraged about all these so-called freedoms that have been taken away from you, right? But even that, it's like senseless. Because government cannot give you your freedom. That's insanity if you think like that. So they cannot take it away either, you see. If your state of mind is in such mess that you think that government has something to say about your freedom, then you've got a problem. Then you're domesticated. Then you're not thinking for yourself. So that's why I say, well, how did these people found the United States federal government? On what grounds, right? Here in the Netherlands, there's, I haven't followed it, but I know that there has been an attempt by, via a, what they call a test case scenario in a court case, about the authority of our queen, whose picture is in every courthouse, right? If you get these letters in the mail, it says, "In the name of the queen," right? And that this was going on, and that the court was arguing that she got her authority from God. And then the question came back, well, which God? Right? And there hasn't been an answer to that. And that's probably because I didn't follow it further. Right? Or maybe it just stopped there. I don't know. Right? But that's even worse. To claim your authority over other people because of quote-unquote some God. That's total insanity. And I think, personally, that the whole thing, the whole idea of government has a lot to do with religion and God. Like Larkin Rose also, he explains it like a religion. People think that government is God. 1789. Thank you, Joe Friday. freedomworks.org content. Federal government was created states. I'll open that and see what we get, right? It's loading, Joe. It's loading. The federal government was created by the states. it says here. The federal government was created by the states. Simple enough, right? In the era of massive federal government expansion, simple facts are easily lost. Lest we lose hold of our plumb line, I don't know what that is, even the simplest, most basic tenets of our founding principle bear repeating. Central to this story are the often forgotten Articles of Confederation, America's first constitution. For everything the articles were or weren't, depending on the argument, the Articles of Confederation were the constitutional expression of this movement, brackets open, revolutionary, close, and the embodiment in government form of the philosophy of the Declaration of Independence, wrote Merrill Jensen. With all the imperfections of our present government, Thomas Jefferson observed, it is without comparison the best existing or that ever did exist. Right? The short-lived articles created a loose confederation of states. No president, no Supreme Court, no federal agencies, just a Congress in charge of brand new nation and mostly independent states. Increasing interstate conflict, inability to protect from insurgencies. What are those? Insurgencies. And financial struggles contributed to calls for a more efficient form of governance. Governance. The end result would be our Constitution. It is worth noting that the entire discussion regarding the Constitution focused on more efficient government than fostered the principles of the revolution, not more government. Well, then don't use the word governance. Those are two different things. The Constitution required states to share their authority with the centralized government in exchange for certain protections. Well, that doesn't make sense. The most obvious protection of state powers was enumerated in the forms of the 10th Amendment. Madison wrote in the Federalist 45, the powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. Those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. But even before the Constitution could become law, it needed the consent of the states via ratification. It was this negotiation that gave us the Bill of Rights, leery of a soft tyranny masked as a central government. Yeah, that's not how the story was told to me. The story, as I was told, goes that the states were presented, so to speak, with this idea of unity, and they weren't totally satisfied with it, and that's where the Bill of Rights came from. So it's been the push was already there, you see. The states were pushed into this. Anti-federalists insisted the Bill of Rights limiting the power of the federal government be included in the Constitution. Only when a Bill of Rights was included would anti-federalists pledge support and ratification of the document. Okay, well that's what I said, right? Fast forward to present-day America. Rather than maintaining the power to govern as their constituency prefers, states as bullied, maligned, and sued by the federal government for refusing to walk lockstep with harmful federal policies that are usually backdoored through government agencies rather than processed through the constitutional remedy of legislation. Moving into the second term of the Obama presidency, remembering that the federal government exists as a means to maximize the efficiency of state powers is crucial to the future of our republic, if we can keep it. Right? So, but again, here also, the question isn't answered. Where does, like for instance, Thomas Jefferson, if he's a part of this, apparently, please excuse me if I'm wrong about that, but his name is mentioned here also. Right? What does he base his authority on? That he can say to the people, so to speak, well, here you go, this is a republic. Who the heck is he, right? Are you worth anything less than he is? Is he some kind of superhuman or something? Okie dokie do. All right. The every hour taxpayers, this is possible suspect answering the question. Every hour taxpayers in the United States are paying $650,482 for cost of military action against ISIS. And then a lot of other stuff for Pentagon slush funds, cost war in Afghanistan, total cost of war since 2001. Yeah, I wasn't asking for those specifics possible. It's very good, all this information. Every hour taxpayer in the United States are paying $116,063 for Predator and Reaper drones in 2016. And I don't know, since the Obamacare is kind of like the medical stuff, is that also considered government expenses? And if so, how much is it? That's what I want to know in relation to other things. Then you know a little bit more about how much, what percentage of the money that is quote unquote available is going to the war. Right? You need to get everything. Continuing. They knew that the more powerful the government became, the sooner it would be corrupted for private use. Yeah. That is why our Constitution was written to limit government power. Our Bill of Rights was written to limit government power. The founders' opposition to standing armies, their stance against fiat paper money, their aversion to taxation, all of these serve to limit government power and, by extension, the inevitable private abuse of that power. Unfortunately, the network has relentlessly undermined and outright destroyed all of the aforementioned limits, one by one, since 1913. Right? So there's another... This is like insane reading in a sense, right? Because somebody put something on a piece of paper and some other people agree and they say, whoa, fantastic, we've got a constitution now, right? And then somebody else comes and destroys that. Well, what did he do? Crumble up the piece of paper and threw it in the garbage? Do you see how insane this kind of thinking is? They cannot destroy your rights. No, I shouldn't say rights. They cannot destroy or give your freedom to you. That's impossible. They don't have your freedom. They don't have your rights either. I misspoke that word just now, but it just comes to me. They don't have your rights either, so they cannot give them to you. Right? And if something that is written on paper, like the Constitution, can be destroyed, then what use is it? Then if it can be destroyed, if it can be, like Bush said, seen as a fracking piece of paper, right? Then what use is it? And why are people so, how do I put this? I guess the best word I can find at the moment is emotional about it, about this constitution. It wasn't even written for them. It's written for the government. They are supposed to abide by the rules, not the people. If you don't work for government, you don't have to be constitutional. Those rules weren't written for normal people. They were only written for people in government. And then, go whine and complain, well, this is unconstitutional. That's the same as saying, Master, please help us. It's a totally insane mindset. Where were we? This perfectly illustrates why we must sever or severely disrupt their so-called income tax funding mechanism. Forget the fact that it was foisted on the nation via fraud and manipulation. Forget the fact that the revenue is being used to destroy, rather than protect, the substance of our Constitution and Bill of Rights. Instead, view the argument against a compulsory income tax purely from the angle of a power relationship. View it in the way the network views it. If the citizenry can force the government to obey its wishes by cutting off access to money, then the citizens have the final say on whether or not a policy decision will survive. I don't, again, the logic escapes me here. I thought if they needed money, they just print it out of thin air, right? What do they need an income tax for? That's not what they pay it with, right? If they need something paid, just print it out of thin air. That's what they've been telling you all of the time here, right? The income tax is like a gold sink, and you need that. Otherwise, your money will be worthless in a week. However, if men with power can simply confiscate whatever amount of money they want, via taxes or via the printing press, then the citizens have lost their most effective non-violent method of control. Yes, they can still express massive disapproval, as they did in the case of the most recent banker bailouts, but this means nothing. As long as the complaints are submitted with payment in full, and all of the outrage over the government's refusal to listen falls on easily replaceable representatives, the network's power remains undisturbed. Ultimately, each individual must decide how to attack the income issue. I myself decided to cut my income drastically, even reducing the amount of money I owed to zero. 18. I guess we missed 17. 18. By 2003, I was painfully aware of the illegitimate nature of our federal government. Due to the amount of money I was making at the time, $500,000 a year, my so-called income tax, even after deductions, were running in excess of $100,000 annually. There is no way I can express how compromised I felt each time I wrote one of those checks, knowing full well that it was empowering individuals who were actively engaged in the destruction of my country. So, I resolved to sell my business and do everything I could to expose their crimes, living mostly off of savings and revenue from whatever assets I could sell. 10 years later, I finally run out of savings and assets. But I don't regret my decision. It feels good to know at the very least I saved myself the angst of handing over another $1 million or more in taxes to a gang of liars, thieves and tyrants. Regretfully, now that I must start earning money again, I will have to face this conflict again. Back to where we were. This is probably too radical for most people, and there are certainly other options. Some find legal ways to reduce their income taxes, others engage in not so legal ways. Some continue paying with complaint, which is at least better than paying without complaint, while others flatly refuse to pay at all. Last but not least, competing currencies also provide an option because they enable citizens to conduct trade outside of the network's financial system. Whether it's with gold and silver coins or, what's that, semi-anonymous, digital currencies like Bitcoin, Litecoin or Dogecoin, the inability of the network to easily track these transactions makes it difficult for its members to calculate what is quote-unquote owed. 19 says, of course, the government is already working to create a regulatory environment that will destroy this advantage. It's then up to the citizens to decide what quote-unquote duty they have to disclose their private financial affairs to men who are openly trying to enslave them. It goes without saying that the founding fathers would have considered the income tax an unconstitutional abomination. It goes without saying that the network used its illegitimate influence to foist his tax on the American people. It should have never existed. It ought to be repealed and replaced with, preferably, nothing. The federal government carried out its intended role in our society without an income tax for more than a century. It can do so again. Let me check that graph possible. US public debt as a percentage of GDP. And this one only goes to 2011. And it's less than at the end of World War II, and bigger than at the end of, or at World War II, World War One, and bigger than what's called the Great Depression in the 1940s. And in the Reagan era, the public debt went down. And now, at 2011, it was at a point what they call the Great Recession. And where the public debt as a percentage of GDP is 60%, or 62, 63, 64. Yeah. Okay, P. Oh, there wasn't enough pixels for the debt of the last 5 years. Okay, P. That brings us to number 4, the next heading. Nullification, refuse to comply, refuse to convict. Practically forgotten, the extremely powerful weapon of nullification has recently been dusted off and is being put to good use. The concept behind nullification is very simple. The people determine what the government has the power to do, not the other way around. When policymakers in Washington grant themselves legal authority to do things that violate the legal restrictions on their power, the people have the right and the duty to restrain them. 24 American states nullified the Real ID Act of 2005. More than a dozen states have successfully defied the federal government over medical marijuana. Nullification initiatives of all kinds involving the recent healthcare legislation, cap and trade, and the Second Amendment are popping up everywhere. The indispensable source for developments connected to nullifications can be found at 10thamendmentcenter.com. It's a legislative tracking page, covers a variety of nullification initiatives and tracks their progress in state legislatures across the country. State nullification, even the threat of state nullification, is a tool that has been used effectively for hundreds of years in this country. From the Alien and Sedition Act of 1798 to the unconstitutional searches and seizures of 1807 and 1809, from resistance to conscription in 1812 to the northern states' obstruction of the fugitive slave laws, nullification has provided a non-violent way for citizens to push back against federal overreach. But state nullification isn't our only option. Another form is jury nullification, and it has the potential to be even more powerful. Jury nullification occurs when a jury concludes that a defendant is technically guilty, but fails to convict the defendant on the grounds that the law in question is unjust. While jury nullification is legal, judges frequently do not inform juries of this power. In the United States, jury nullification first appeared in the pre-Civil War era, where juries sometimes refused to convict for violations of the Fugitive Slave Act. Later, during Prohibition, juries often nullified alcohol control laws, possibly as often as 60% of the time. This resistance may have contributed to the adoption of the 21st Amendment repealing prohibition. Blah, blah. To demonstrate the enormity of this direct power, we were given our government. I'm sorry, that sentence doesn't make sense. To demonstrate the enormity of this direct power, we were given over our government. Ta-da! Imagine the following hypothetical scenario. I'm a juror, and you have been dragged into court for refusing to pay your taxes to the network's collection instrument, the IRS. Unrepentant, you stand and state the following. I will no longer voluntarily fund an institution that violates the law with impunity and engages in morally reprehensible behavior. I will no longer be complicit in crime. I would rather be punished for obeying my conscience than be rewarded for ignoring it. It's very unlikely that your defense attorney would support this approach, but remember that this is just a hypothetical scenario to demonstrate the power we still possess as citizens. If I'm a juror in this case, you'd better believe that I'm going to argue for nullification. If that fails, I'm going to ensure a hung jury. There will be no conviction this time around. Now, multiply that same scenario a couple of dozen times, then a couple of hundred times, and more, and the power over incomes stolen by the network in 1913 will be rightfully returned to the people. Laws that cannot be successfully prosecuted cannot survive. Nullification is our final non-violent check on the abuse of government power. If just 15% of the adult population in the United States, roughly 30 million citizens, learn about and begin employing the aforementioned options, the continued illegitimate control of this nation will be rendered nearly impossible. But this army of informed and actively engaged citizens isn't going to magically appear on its own. Moreover, those who currently hold power will attack our efforts with every lie and dirty trick that they can muster. But then again, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Right? Again, here there is the wrong mental state. Right? It says, power concedes nothing without a demand, and it never did, and it never will. This reminds me of a quote, somebody, I don't know who, but that you have to demand things from, well, it was the oppressor, something about demands and an oppressor. The oppressor would not give you voluntarily, right? You would have to demand. If you demand things from somebody, that means that you expect him to do what you wish, right? Now, the mental problem here, the mental state here, is that of a serf. The one asking, the one demanding, is putting himself in a lower position. You don't demand in your mind. You shouldn't demand things from politicians. It puts you in a servile state. If we intend to take back what false and designed men 24 have stolen, 24, 24. This is a reference to famous quote by Samuel Adams. It reads in part, "The liberties of our country, the freedom of our civil constitution are worth defending at all hazards, and it is our duty to defend them against all attacks. It will bring an everlasting mark of infamy on the present generation, enlightened as it is, if we should suffer them to be wrested from us by violence without a struggle, or be cheated out of them by the artifices of false and designing men. Of the latter we are in the most danger at present." Supposedly by Samuel Adams. Continuing, "We must be prepared to demand it." Right? I don't think so. Yeah. These people should be ignored. These people that you're so-called demanding it from. They should be shunned into non-existence. That's how you treat these people. Place yourself above it. If we hope to achieve our ends via non-violent means, the time to act is now. And if a violent confrontation proves unavoidable, we can rest assured that the non-violent network we have done will provide the foundation for our success. We can rest assured that the non-violent work we have done will provide the foundation for our success. To clarify the importance of resistance, I will cover the incredible lawlessness and immorality of those we're up against in the final chapters. Rather than focus on how they might abuse their power, I'll focus on how they already have. Yeah, I'm sure, there's no doubt. And I think there's a couple of other people that also say this. I think Larkin Rose is amongst one of them. I am one of these people, that say that, oh, you can blame all of these so-called elitist people all you like, but it's us. We, the people, so to speak, have let this happen, right? And since we outnumber them many to one, it's just insane that this is even going on. And it's our own damn fault. And people don't like to hear that it's our fault. They would like to blame somebody else. Well, you need to grow up. You can't, like a little child, blame somebody else for the misfortunes you find yourself in. It's all your own damn fault. It's all our own damn fault. And that brings us to the end of chapter 5. Let's see, how do we get to 6? Here we go. No. We need to move to chapter 6. I can also make the 5 a 6, right? Oh. Let's see, what's that kind of graph? Total prison population, United States 2,200,000, China 1.6 million, Russia over 500,000, Brazil over 500,000, India just under 500,000, Thailand 308,000, Mexico 255,000. Land of the free, right? Let's see, has this page loaded? Yes, it has. Now can I adjust it? There we go, chapter 6. This one also needs to move to chapter 6 so I can check the numbers. 6. There we go. Chapter 6. Rulers represent themselves. A quote by John Adams. Liberty cannot be preserved without a general knowledge among the people of that most dreaded and envied kind of knowledge. I mean of the characters and conduct of their rulers. I'm sorry, I got a hard time trying to make sense of this. Liberty cannot be preserved without a general knowledge among the people, that most dreaded and envied kind of knowledge. I mean of the characters and conduct of their rulers. Right, so what's liberty here? Is liberty connected to rulers in some way? Does liberty mean freedom under government or something? You know, I don't get it. It just doesn't make sense. And I don't like the word liberty, to be honest with you, in this case. What does it mean with the word liberty? What's the definition here? Why not use the word freedom? Because that's what it's about. It's about freedom. And if you're talking about freedom, then you cannot have rulers. It's as simple as that. And then it says John Adams, number 1. Let's see what it says at number 1. Need to scroll down here. 1. This quote carries a heavy dose of irony. Can there be true liberty if elected officials see themselves as rulers? Oh, good question. And if John Adams truly believed in the concept of liberty, would he have ever signed the Alien and Sedition Acts into law? Right, so that was 1. Again, how do you define liberty, right? Let's see. Definition, liberty. Which one do we use? Merriam-Webster? Cambridge English? Oxford Dictionary? Let's see. Liberty. Noun. Mass noun, whatever that is. The state of being free within society from oppressive restrictions imposed by authority on one's behavior or political views. Compulsory retirement would interfere with individual liberty. So this is not a good definition because it's a negative one. What do I mean with that? It says here, the state of being free within society from oppressive restrictions. See, they're talking about you're being free from something. That's a negative. Right? Don't accept negative definitions. They are not very good most of the times. Plus more sentences. What is that? It continues in what's that? Condorcet's view, modern society and individual liberty could be served only by public instruction understood in this sense. I don't get that at all. Technology has the capacity to impose graduated restrictions on liberty, but this is an issue the government is specifically avoiding confronting. In addition to provide society with political liberty and justice, a single tax on land promotes economic efficiency. I don't know, guys. What does this have to do with liberty? I just don't understand. We're talking about political liberty here now. There's more. 1.1. The state of not being imprisoned or enslaved. Right? No, that's the stupid view that the Dutch people have here. If you ask people in the Netherlands, what is freedom? They say, well, if you say somebody is free, you say he's free, it means he's not in jail. Right? Yeah, the Dutch people have such a completely lost idea about what freedom is. It's unbelievable. Even the dumbest American probably knows more about freedom than a Dutch person does. Alright, so, but again, it's a negative one. Right? Your liberty, apparently, this is still under liberty, according to this Oxford dictionary. It's a state of not being imprisoned or enslaved. Something that's not. It's a negative. Yeah? Not good. Not good enough. 1.2. The power or scope to act as one pleases. Individuals should enjoy the liberty to pursue their own preferences. Right? So there I don't see the difference between the word freedom and liberty. 1.3. Philosophy. A person's freedom from control by fate or necessity. Dus determinism versus free will. 2. As a count noun, usually liberties, a right or privilege. Now those are two different things also. Right? I mean the word right, now I've got a lot of trouble even establishing the valid basis for that. Yeah? Even I heard this discussion on air about the principle of non-aggression, which I uphold. Well, the one that initiates violence is the one that's wrong. But a right is not something, like I said, that can be given to you by somebody else. That's just insane thinking. A privilege is something completely different. That can be given or taken away. So 2, count, noun, usually liberties, a right or privilege, especially a statutory one. The Bill of Rights was intended to secure basic civil liberties. Yeah. These words are just so strange to use sometimes, right? It says here, the Bill of Rights was intended to secure basic civil liberties. It's about the last 2 words. If you're a civilian, then that means, if you regard yourself as a civilian, then that means your mind is so totally domesticated that you cannot even speak of freedom, These people have no free will because they don't think for themselves. Therefore, you cannot speak of liberties in that sense. These people are dead. Literally, almost. And they are surely dead mentally. All right, and so you can't give liberties to dead people. It's 5:10. We're skipping past the top of the hour, but we're getting some poker face soon. We're just not done with this liberty thing here yet. 3. Count noun. Informal. A presumptuous remark or action. How did he know what she was thinking? It was a liberty. All right. Do something. He's not at liberty to discuss his real work. Again, this is a negative one. And then 2, it says allowed or entitled. Right? Does that have anything to do with freedom? If somebody else can allow you or entitle you to do something, are we talking about freedom here? Not at all. Then there's taking liberties. The origin is scrolling down a bit. From Old French liberté, from Latin libertas, from liber, free, but also book. And the word library also comes from there. Blah, blah. So, what was going on in the chat in the meanwhile? Silly Villains, Cracker, what's up, buddy? We're gonna take a little break, guys, so I can make me some tea. Poker face! Check them out at pokerface.com. We're going to listen to a couple of minutes of them. I don't know how long yet. We will see. Let me know if the sound is all right.
Little thief in the night. We do that here. They are laughing, they are screaming, it's such a good time. And they're naked, and they're drugged up, they're so sublime. Now they know there's not to end, though they can't say the line. They're hiding, yeah, they're lying, and they won't forget. We all laughing, we're still screaming to some other God. Here and so, and for, without life. He's bringing down love of peace, and keeping it safe. So they can continue to party and rage. Now you're leaving the night, he's coming, he's coming.
That was a bit short. One more.
Thank you very much. If you dig what you're hearing, check us out, www.pokerface.com. We're on Facebook. We're on MySpace. Does anybody use MySpace anymore? Nobody? Okay. Guess I'm one of the last remaining few. That's why I don't get too many messages, apparently. Go. Down deep below, living on rock while they're making a smile. Someday they will be unleashed. And I saw the lights in the skies. Those are not people. Something left the night sky back in the day. You know what I'm saying? I see that look in your eyes. What a disbelief. Nothing that I see is getting through to you. You don't believe unless you see it on your TV. Then it's like a God that lives over you. Just live in a dream. Cause I will be your attention. Please be kind. Listen to me just for a minute now. You represent our differences inside my brain. Over and about in the same path. Cause everything you know. Cause I'm everywhere. You guys are too kind, man. Thank you.
Pokerface. Check them out at pokerface.com. Welcome back, everybody. I got my cup of tea. This is ucy.tv. There's a chat room there. A couple of people have joined since the first hour. Dan has joined. Joanna Taco, Matty Clues, and the rest that I named in the first hour. Welcome, everybody. Also check out reallibertymedia.com. There's a at the top there you can see a whole list. Select the channel to start. At 6 you can find ucy.tv for instance, but there's much more there. And check out Friday at 11 p.m. the Freakers Ball, hosted by Grimner, together with Moose Girl. They play some nice music. Unfortunately, I can't listen to it on the rebroad. This is, come on, you browser, do what I wish. Yeah, there we go. And also, freedomsnetwork.com. Alright, so where were we? What the heck? Is this where we were? In the Declaration of Independence, we find the primary argument for establishing government power to secure the rights of people. Yeah. Is that what you call, guys? The primary argument is to secure the rights of people. So, tell me, how does this make sense, right? I come to you and I say to you, could you make sure that my rights are secured? Do you see how that's the wrong mindset again? Why would you even want somebody else to ensure your rights, to secure your rights? And what are these rights? And I'm probably gonna make people question some things here, but as a philosopher, as far as I'm concerned, rights that you have are self-evident and natural. That means you breathe, you eat, you walk around. You can do actually you can do anything you like as long as you don't harm somebody else. As long as you don't hinder somebody else in their life. I think it was Grammy who put forth this argument, and I found it very, very good. As he said that you might have this fantastic idea, and you may wish to implement this idea, and you may even get a lot of people to accept your idea, and that's all just fine. And I think that's just great also. But once you start forcing your idea on somebody else, then you got a problem. See? So I found that one is very good. And so I don't find that a very good argument, this primary argument for establishing the government power to secure the rights of people. No. Without some type of protection mechanism in place, criminals will prey on the population without fear of consequences. Again, this is a flawed argument, and I'll explain why. You're telling me that, well, we have to do something to secure the rights of people because amongst us, there are some criminals. So what do? You pick some people from amongst us and you put them in government. How stupid can you be, right? Does that make any sense? In the exact same document, we find the primary argument for limiting or revoking government power to secure the rights of the people. Without some type of protection mechanism in place, criminals will gain control of government and use its power to prey on the population. Yeah. So what you gonna do? Are you gonna check everybody that comes into government, put them through some sort of machine, and the machine then decides, well, this is a good human, and this one can pass? It just, it's just insane. Let's see. They will do as they please to those who are too weak to resist them. He's now talking about the criminals in government. They will never use the power of government to prosecute and punish themselves. The first argument, government can protect us from crime, is still alive and well. In fact, it's drilled relentlessly into every citizen's head from a very early age. However, the second argument, government can actually subject us to crime, has practically disappeared from politically correct conversation. Alright, so the first argument he says here, government can protect us from crime, is still alive and well. Well, that's insane also. Government doesn't protect you from crime. If anything, self-defense is what protects you from crime, not government. This despite the fact that the threat posed by criminals in government far exceeds any threat posed by common criminals. If there is any doubt, consider the following. Common criminals do not have access to the media, the thrust of the masses, or the air of legitimacy given to those who secure a position of authority. They cannot legally seize our money, destroy the purchasing power of our currency, or control the police and military. No, in fact, the government is worse. It's worse than a common criminal. My source for this is Lysander Spooner. Check him out, Lysander Spooner. Common criminals cannot legislate away our rights or reduce our children to debt slaves. They cannot obstruct an inquiry into their crimes from inside the system. They cannot seal, document, confiscate and lose evidence or appoint their own investigators. Common criminals can write laws and selectively enforce them. They cannot, it says. They cannot disarm millions of their would-be victims, round them up and put them in cages, or worse. They cannot. He's talking about criminals now in the sense that the normal people would see somebody that breaks the law, right? You crossed the red light, you speeded in the car, you stole an apple, you're a criminal, right? While the definition of the word criminal here is just because you broke the law, no matter what the law says, right? If the law says you're not allowed to grow this plant, then, if you do so, you're a criminal. I think that's a totally skewed use of the word that we have. I would rather use it in a normal sense, as in criminal is somebody that harms somebody else, right? So you don't harm somebody else if you grow a plant, right? And so the real quote-unquote criminals are sitting in government. Suffice to say, this is why those who created the United States government spoke constantly about limiting its power via the Constitution and Bill of Rights. As Thomas Jefferson wrote in the Kentucky Resolution of 1798, too much confidence in our elected leaders' good intentions is the parent of despotism everywhere. It would be a dangerous delusion, he warned, for us to trust those who currently hold power simply because they are men of our choice. In question of power, let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down from mischief by the change of the Constitution. Chains. Thomas Jefferson, Kentucky Resolutions. Members of the network have spent the past 100 years doing everything in their power to nurture the dangerous delusion that Jefferson warned us about. Yeah, and I don't trust those people for one bit either. This whole Jefferson, what are the names? Madison, those. Yeah, what do you call them? Framers? I guess that's the word I was looking for. Don't trust them one bit. In Chapter 1, we briefly covered the 1950s area investigation into large tax-exempt foundations. Many were shocked when it was discovered that the capitalist foundations were using their money to support communism. At first glance, this seems ridiculous. Why would the wealthiest man in the world want to orient American Far Eastern policies towards communist objectives? 3. Taken from the final report in the Senate International Security Subcommittee, Institute of Pacific Relations. This seemingly suicidal policy begins to make more sense when you learn how the network actually operates. It's important to remember that war and the threat of war has enabled them more than anything else to inch closer to their goal of destroying national sovereignty. Norman Dodd was the lead researcher for one of the aforementioned investigations, that's the Rees Commission, and as such, he has chosen to appoint the committee's staff. By the 1950s, propaganda touting the humanitarian benevolence of the tax-exempt foundation was widely accepted, and many people, including one of Dodd's researchers, Catherine Casey, felt that the foundations were beyond reproach. Remember, I told you about Catherine 1 or 2 weeks ago. As Dodd put it, Casey was unsympathetic to the purpose of the investigation. Her attitude was, what could possibly be wrong with foundations? They do so much good. 5. At 5 it says source. That's where I got it from also, what I told you last week. Interview on YouTube. Norman Dodd, check it out. But Casey's trust was soon shattered as she dug into what was, at that time, decades-old records of the network's connected Carnegie Foundation. Dodd explains, I blocked out certain periods of time for Casey to concentrate on, and off she went to New York. She came back at the end of 2 weeks with the following on dictaphone tapes. We are now at the year 1908. In that year, the trustees raised a specific question, which they discussed throughout the balance of the year in a very learned fashion. The question is there any means known more effective than war, assuming you wish to alter the life of an entire people? And they concluded that no more efficient means than war to that end is known to humanity. So then, in 1909, they raised the second question and discussed it, namely, how do we involve the United States in a war? Then finally they answered that question as follows. We must control the State Department. That very naturally raises the question of how do we do that? And they answer it by saying, we must take over and control the diplomatic machinery of this country. And finally, they resolve to aim at that as an objective. Keep in mind, the plans that Casey is reporting on were originally written just a few years before the network managed to gain control of the diplomatic machinery of the country, using Woodrow Wilson and Mandel House. That control was later expanded via the network-led group of experts known as the Inquiry. The Inquiry, in turn, evolved into what is known as the Council on Foreign Relations. Between 20 years of its founding, the CFR's enormous power within the State Department was undeniable. Look no further than the 1939 War and Peace Studies for an excellent example. 6, it says, today, there is a good deal of information available on the CFR-directed War and Peace Studies. However, the project was initially top secret, unknown to all but a handful of CFR members. In Seeds of Destruction, page 102, William Engdahl notes, the War and Peace Studies group of the New York Council on Foreign Relations effectively took over all significant post-war planning for the United States State Department. After 1942, most of its members were quietly put directly on the State Department payroll. Casey's report continues. Then time passes and we are eventually in a war, which would be World War I. At that time, they record on their minutes a shocking report in which they dispatched to President Wilson a telegram, cautioning him to see that the war does not end too quickly. Finally, of course, the war is over. At that time, their interest shifts over to preventing what they call a reversion of life in the United States to what it was prior to 1914, when World War I broke out. At that point, they came to the conclusion that to prevent a reversion, we must control education in the United States. They realized that that's a pretty big task. Then they decided that the key to success lay in the altering of the teaching of American history. According to Norman Dodd, Casey was so devastated by the information she uncovered during the Reese Committee investigation that she never recovered. As far as its impact on Catherine Casey was concerned, she never was able to return to her law practice. Ultimately, she lost her mind as a result of it. It was a terrible shock. It's a very rough experience to encounter proof of these kinds. Yeah, it is. And I would guess especially more so for the people in that time period. I mean, today, the madness has risen to such ridiculous heights that it shouldn't come as a shock to most people that things aren't as they were told to them. Right? Quote unquote, waking up, whatever that is, shouldn't be as a shock, as much of a shock as it was in the 1950s. Eight. What does it say at 8? The source is at realityzone.com, hidden agenda 2.html. That final sentence is profound. It actually is a very rough experience to encounter proof that you've been intentionally misled. It is painful to learn that intelligent, manipulative, and arrogant liars have secured your well-meaning trust only then to play you as a fool. Nobody wants to face that feeling, and, as it relates to our powerful institutions, that feeling gets worse before it gets better. After discovering the initial betrayal, you come to realize that your trust has been betrayed at every turn. You realize that the entire system has been designed to deceive and trap you, along with the rest of the unsuspecting public, in a fabricated reality, in an illusion. Alright, so I would totally agree with that whole paragraph. And by living in an illusion, by me claiming that people live in an illusion, I don't mean that the universe is made of photons or something, and you're living in some kind of simulation. No. There is a total disconnect between what you perceive with your senses, with your eyes, with your ears, what you hear, how you think about that. What you do with the grammar that's been presented to you. It's the perceptions are fine. It's what you do with them. People damn well can see what's going on, but their eyes are close to it somehow. It's a figurative way of speaking in this case. Hold on, guys. So, blah, blah, blah. Alright, so the illusion is in their heads, not outside. Not what they perceive is real. Alright? It's what you do with it then. How do I put that? It's a strange literal translation from Dutch. Hard optreden. Act vigorously or whatever against the idea that reality doesn't exist. That all of it is an illusion. And that's of course because of my philosophical inclination. Right? Reality was there long before you were born. Right? So it's not created by you. It's only perceived by you, and then you need to analyze what you perceive, and it's in the analyzing of perceptions that things go strange and in opposite directions. And you get a world view, a thing in your mind that is in no way connected to what's real. And then you live in an illusion, and therefore you are dead. You don't exist. Continuing, perhaps worst of all, after some study and serious thought, you begin to comprehend the enormity of the problem. The same institutional propaganda that initially fooled you still holds sway over millions and millions of minds. To unlock those minds, you must convince people to investigate ugly truths that, to them, seem ridiculous and offensive. You have to overcome the fact that most people will be unsympathetic to the purpose of any investigation that challenges their deeply held beliefs. Yeah. I would say that in most of the cases, most of the time, your efforts to wake somebody up are useless. I think that for most of the people that listen to this Solvinur event were already on this path from the moment that they were born. And it is very, very rare for somebody that did not question things when they had to go to school from age 4, 5, 6, right? If you were in such a mental state that you think authority, like a teacher, is normal, then there is very little chance of escaping the illusion that people live in. I think you almost have to be born resistant or something like that to be able to pierce through the layers and layers of deception and lies that are put in front of us. Most of the time, this also is because you and I and everybody else that listens could not imagine being as evil as these people are. Right? That's also a reason why it's hard to quote-unquote wake up. And then there's something I'd like to say about cognitive dissonance. I hear that term being used over and over again, but what they actually mean is denial. So then use that word. Use the word denial when it's useful, and use cognitive dissonance when it is useful. When it's useful when you're talking about a feeling that overcomes you, when you're confronted with a fact that does not strive with the worldview that you have at that moment. It's a feeling. It's not a denial. The denial may come later, because you will not look at your feeling and investigate further. If that doesn't happen, then the denial comes. But cognitive dissonance is where you have two opposing ideas. And you notice that for the first time. It's like noticing your own doublethink. And then if you solve that strange feeling will also disappear, and you will no longer have cognitive dissonance. So if you get that feeling that there's something wrong, that's the best way I can describe it, there's something wrong with the information I'm receiving now. It's either wrong because it's conflicting with what you're already thinking, or it's wrong because it's really wrong information. You need to check it out. You need to check both of the sides here, is which information is correct. Right? This is also known as a dialectic in your head. It's a removal of contradictions. A feeling of uneasiness will creep onto you if you stumble onto a contradiction that you haven't solved yet. That is cognitive dissonance. And it's a useful tool for yourself. Continuing. Catherine Casey uncovered a criminal conspiracy that was so inherently immoral and so at odds with popular perception that few people would ever believe the story was true. And since we don't have access to the documents she saw, healthy skepticism is perfectly reasonable. So, moving forward, let's assume that all we have to go on is a few general assertions. 1. Members of the network believe they have a right to rule in secrecy. 2. By controlling policy and public perception, they have the ability to do so. Yeah. I don't know what it is with this word perception here. I was just talking about it, right? By controlling policy and public perception. What they mean here with perception is leaving out the grammar is what they mean. Is they will present you with quote-unquote facts, and then they count on you to use your logic to come to a certain conclusion. And they know how your logic works. So they know what kind of conclusion you will come to if they give you specific pieces of grammar, specific building blocks, specific pieces of data to work with. Right? That's what they mean by controlling perception, in the sense that, not in the sense that they can decide whether you see a green tree or a blue tree. It's that they decide what kind of information gets through to you. And then they count on your own mental abilities to come to certain conclusions and say, vote for whatever, you know? And so that's one of the main fallacies that is being used against you, and you have to be careful to not use it against somebody else. It's aspect of neglect, it's called. It means you did not enter in all the data. It means your grammar, your beginning point, was flawed. Like, for instance, with these people that claim that the Earth is warming up. Their main piece, most important piece of missing grammar is the sun. And as long as those people do not take a look at the sun and its role in our earthly goings on, then they can never ever come to a valid conclusion. Because the grammar pieces are missing. 3. Because of their power within the political system, their crimes are rarely exposed and never properly punished. Throughout the remainder of this book, I will prove that these 3 assertions are true. Operation Northwoods is the next heading. Hold on, guys. 1 sec, I'm just checking some things here. Posted in the last hour by Juana Taco. Words is going back to what I was talking about. Words around the snippet of Douglas's quote. The whole history of the progress of human liberty shows that all concessions yet made have been born of earnest struggle. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both moral and physical, but it's a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did and it never will. Right? We talked about that, remember? And then it continues here from Juana. Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact amount of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue till they are resisted with either words or blows or with both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. Frederick Douglass. Yeah. So what is Frederick Douglass doing here? Is he accepting the presence of these tyrants? Is he doing that? By saying the limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress, says Frederick Douglass. Is Frederick Douglass now assuming that it is normal for tyrants to exist? It's just my question, right? Or is he more like Lysander Spooner, who's much more clear in his words? Because I don't know this Frederick Douglass. There you go, Joanna. Joanna says Frederick Douglass was a slave. Aha. Yes, he felt that slavery was normal until he learned how to read. Very good. Oh, is that slave? I'm not sure if it's the same one, but is that the one that realized when his slave master when he went to his slave master and he said, well, I want to be free. And the slave master said, well, okay, go away and just give me 10% or so of what you make and you can be free. And initially, apparently, he was very glad with that. But later on, he found out that, no, this is not freedom. And he's taxing me. He's saying I have to give him some of what I earned to him. I'm still a slave. Is that the same one, Joanna? Okay, it's not the same one. This is another one. It's also very nice. I think he even wrote a book. So, that's my outro. So, thanks a lot for listening, everybody.
An inside job? How dare you? How dare you?
I'll be back next week.